welcome to the part 2 of the two-part series. If you saw the first Beechcraft Duke video, it was the piston version. If you're interested in the piston version, please check out my channel. It should be up as well as this one at the same exact time. What we're doing is we do with all of the AOK rapid reviews, maybe not so rapid for the Turbine Duke, because this is quote-unquote study level, just like the piston version is. Just look at that light fixture. The riveting there, the screw heads, they are very exquisite. So this, indeed, is the PT6 version, approximately 550 shaft horsepower per engine here. This is a turboprop, obviously, for braided hard sole propeller per side. And we're obviously looking at 550 plus 550, give or take, is well over 1,000. So this aircraft is theoretically capable of a 4,000 foot per minute climb rate. So I am excited about that. The piston version is not by any means a performance slouch, but this is what I'm here for. Essentially, to see just how much speed we can get out of this Rocket Engineering modified aircraft. They were the company over there in Washington that performed these modifications on these Dukes, particularly to get more performance out of them. The piston engine was fast, but these are faster not only because they have more horsepower, but if I just back up here a second and shift up, these nacelles here are far more aerodynamic than the piston version, the big flat shoe boxes that the IO 541s, TIO 541s, excuse me, were inside of. And that being said, in continuing on with the spirit of this review, I am indeed fully interested in a different livery. This one has 9, just like the piston has 9 on the Grand Duke in terms of different paint options, and the regular Duke has 4. I like the Duke with 4 because there's a black version on there that's really cool looking, but it doesn't have the winglets, and it has the lower 215 knot cruise speed. So, yeah, nice paint. I wish I could get the black on this turbine version, but beggars can't be choosers. So, proverbially speaking, I guess we're just going to have to stick with white, blue, and gold, which is nice. November 3675 Delta, presumably modeled after a real-world Duke. That is a very specific N number. And just like the piston version, the details here are really nice. The weathering is really nice. I mean, you can see the specular layer of textures there for the shine. You can see the paint there in the bottom right. The sun gleaming off of it and showing a little bit of age. It's not exactly glossy and perfect, but that's what we like to see when we're doing these textures and the analysis of them. Of course, 100 low lead for the piston version, but Jet A here, 140 US gallons. I mean, I'm trying to upload this at 4K, as I normally do. And being able to read a sticker like that and having such fine detail in the screw heads, minus, of course, if there's any YouTube video compression, everything there looks really nice. For sure, it's high quality. BlackSquare offers nothing but the best, and I'm looking forward to a little bit easier flight controls, perhaps, and by that I mean engine management. No, the Piston Duke in my first part 1 review was not hard at all by any means to fly, but the difference between a piston-driven engine and a turbine-driven engine are such that we should not have to worry about fuel management in terms of rich of peak, lean of peak. We can just let the engine control unit do that, so we should be able to enjoy and look out the window more than worrying about the fidelity of the systems like engine wear and damage, overboosting engines, things like that when you have turbochargers. So that being said, let's go ahead and hop on inside and take a look at the rest of the model and see what the pilot in command has to offer. Be right back. Okay, so just a couple things to go over here. Externally, you notice the ground power unit, which is what that was connected to the nacelle. We are powering up these instruments with external power. Of course, there's a battery 1 and a battery 2 here. And this most advanced EFB, I mentioned about how this was rarely comparable with any other EFBs so far. BlackSquare offers a beautiful product. Their detail not only looks nice, but it functions nice. I mean, this is a PT6 engine. So what we're looking at here is essentially this being the front of the engine, this being the back of the engine. This is where your air comes in through the scoop on the bottom right below the propeller spinner. Comes in here and mixes with the different stages. It goes through here and comes out here, and it hits these bigger turbine blade sections. Now what you're going to see here is that there's a split in there. Let's see if I can zoom in a little bit. There's a split in between this portion of the shaft and this portion of the shaft. They are not physically connected through any common mechanical means. So the air that spins off of this turbine coming from the back of the engine essentially blows over these blades. These blades go into a gearbox, and then these gearboxes control this shaft here, which is connected directly to the propeller. So in fact, when your propeller is spinning on a PT6, it is not through means directly connected through a common shaft like you might have in a turbojet 737 engine or a turbofan 737 or any other engine. So very interesting to note. It kind of works a little bit like, dare I say, the hydraulic fluid in a torque converter through the motion of the fluid spinning across the blade surfaces here, i.e. the air that comes in through the back of the engine and then spools up and then ultimately turns the propeller. That's my rudimentary explanation. I was never gifted with a high IQ, but that is essentially how a PT6 works. So, of course, you've got a left and a right. You've got engine wear. Again, I pointed on the piston version of my review. The Hobbs meter there was 0.0, and this is also 0.0. So I've not started it. I've not listened to it. I have not flown it at all. So this will be a first for me, just like the piston was. There's still all the very same things. You've got batteries here. What's neat to note is that I believe the piston only had one battery. This has got two. Naturally, to spool up a turbine engine takes a little bit more effort than rotating a piston, perhaps. And it's electronical load shedding, so you can see what systems work, what systems are not working, how it all works. And this is a great exercise in theoretical operation, right? You can watch these dials and gauges and understand when you're pressing and pulling levers and knobs and turning buttons what is actually happening in here, and more than likely identically in the real world, because that's the level of detail that we're looking at here. Yes, there are failures that you can fail. All types of things: fuel controls, low pressure, high pressure, bleeds, generators, whatever it is. They've got your cup of tea, or they've got your emergency, to be more accurate. So I just want to flop over here to the GNS 530 and show you that, like with the piston, as I keep mentioning, this review is being done in service update 14. So when 15 comes out, aha, you may need to reinstall the aircraft due to this aircraft going to become even better than it already will inevitably be, as we see in this review. So I like to go back to the GTN 750. All of these other ones, KX 155B, 9DB, these are all more rudimentary navigational devices, as well as the radio fixtures. So we're doing the PMS50 GTN 750 and the GTN 650. Now, the 750 right here, primary front and center, is the premium, and it is absolutely not included as a premium version with this aircraft. I pay for this, as well as Navigraph charts, so being able to go in and import SimBrief flight plans that I make on the internet, I can upload directly into this navigation, makes playing the game a lot easier. So the gist of the story is, if you have an aircraft with this much detail, as you can see interior-wise and exteriorly, as well as systems depth, my goal is get as much out of the plane as you possibly can. And I will say the PMS50 and or the TDS version, 750XI, or whichever your cup of tea is, will add to the level that's already outrageous here. Just have to illustrate, circuit breakers, they do indeed function. that is what we are working with here. Naturally, we still have a 6-pack, just like the piston version with the gauges, but a little bit of difference here. We've got torque monitors, we've got interstage turbine temperatures, we've got NG percent RPM, we've got prop RPM, fuel flow. So these are a little bit more high-tech gauges, and they help us just monitor our turboprop engine here. Naturally, these are different. So we've got igniter conditions, and we've got generators and all types of pumps that we can, fuel pump, wing pump, auxiliary pump, all types of stuff that we can run essentially to keep our engines and aircraft in overall good health. A little bit different. I find these gauges, as well as the gauges in the piston, to be a little bit different in that I like the way these look. So by default, this would be my chicken to fly around, I guess, as opposed to the piston. That does not mean the piston is not fully capable of. If you watch part 1 for sure, you'll already know that, or please go watch it. I appreciate your time either way, but this is what I am looking forward to, the turbine engine. I'm going to leave this port window open so that we can hear what's going on here. And unlike the piston, that was harder for me to start because of the obvious mixture controls and variable starting conditions. I am going to start this aircraft up in the way that you would start any turboprop. Well, I shouldn't say that. That's a disclaimer. Play at your own risk. But let's go ahead and see if we can put the right-hand igniters to auto. Let's see if we can get a light off here. So I want to do fuel pump on. You can see the igniters are sparking here. And I want to rotate this. Let's see if we can rotate it without the starter. Correction. Let's hit the starter, not do the igniters. We'll pop the igniters, and then we'll put our fuel flow in. You can see the exhaust gas temperature coming up. We're watching our gauges. And that was a relatively hot start, but that was due to my lack of intelligence. I think it's important to see that because that lets you know this is not one of those aircraft where you can just monkey around with. It absolutely is the kind of plane that you can damage, and I really like that. So as terrible as it would be to hot start an engine like this in the real world, I think it's awesome for you to be able to see those types of features here. So let's go ahead and try that again. Let's get the ignition on, the wing pump. We'll just do starter auto this time, and then we'll spool it up to max rotation. And even though the engine's spooling, you'll see the propeller starting to spin slowly. It's that bypass air flowing over the blades on this portion of the engine. Let's go ahead and throw our fuel forward. Now, you'll see with the proper procedure, that was much cooler. As opposed to in the yellow arc, we got nowhere near the yellow. So well sub 800 degrees Celsius for the ITT. That was what I would call a safe start, my friends. So, everything's in auto. The igniters are still popping off. Let's see what happens if you turn them off. So they do turn off. That's cool. Notice they're not sparking anymore. We've got batteries there. Let's see, now that we've been jet blasting the person outdoors with the external power unit, let's take that off. Go to internal power. Close this window. Listen to the change of sound. Okay. So there you go. And I'll adjust the volume a little bit now that we're indoors. If you had any issues hearing me, hopefully you do not now. Let's go outside and listen to the externals real quick. So me being the professional that I inevitably am, thank goodness I turned on all of my lights, wink wink, before we started the engine. That's all good. And now that we're running, seems as though we've got everything good. I've cleared our caution messages here. It says left engine start. So there you go. We'll turn the starter off because, again, Mr. Professional here likes to do everything by the book. And generator's on, so that's cool. That's different than the piston. So you go from off to swing in the start. Once you go from start, then you go up for the generator. Okay, we learn something every day. Ignition to auto. You know, that's one of the things you want to do with a study aircraft, you know. This is sarcasm, by the way. Try to start up an engine before you know anything about it, especially when they're hundreds of thousands of dollars a piece, probably to rebuild or replace. But, you know. So we've got everything 24 volts, everything's charging, cabin pressure. Let's go down there. We'll set our takeoff flaps midway. Let's throw the blower on high. We'll throw auto cool on. We're not going to mess with the cabin rotation knob for the altitude, as we're not going to be going super high today with this review. Pressurization air. Let's go see what that is there. Pull to off. Lots of fun things to play with here. Co-pilot air, cabin air, fantastic. Temperature, we've got cabin altitude indicator, positive or negative rate during climbs or descents. We've got all kinds of trend monitors here, ADF frequencies, navigation radios, weather radar. Man, we've just got it all here. I tell you, left pitot heat off. We'll turn that on before we start our climb. Let's throw our ice deflection. That's cool. Those work. Obviously, those work. Oil doors. Air conditioning on. Right pitot heat. As stated. Let's hide this here real quick and then remove this out of the way. A lot of these things you can't see. Prop heat, pitot, stall. Left and right. Fuel vents. Left and right. Why not just grab a whole heap and load of this stuff? Everything's on. Fantastic. Great. Strobes. All good. Panel lights. And it all works, right? It all works. Now, I want to leave this on because I'd like to illustrate the engine on takeoff. So let me taxi on out with this professional, unprofessional review to the active just before, and we'll get right back for that takeoff. Okay, so yours truly is back just like that. I believe I've got this all cleared up, including we've removed the throttle stop lock so we can actually run our engines up, because this ain't dangerous at all with me in charge. So, again, we have extra stopping power, because as we rev up, we can also go into reverse pitch from the propellers. Nice little added feature. Goes backwards as well with reverse thrust. So that being said, I believe we are all set. I've got my field of view zoomed out a little bit intentionally because I want you to see out the window. I want you to be able to see the gauges, and also want you to be able to see the diagram of the left-hand engine while it is operating, because I think that's really neat. So the piston engine was cool, as well as the A2A version that illustrates something like that on the EFB, but I have not seen it yet with a turboprop. So, that being said, really cool to be able to see that type of simulation in here. Let's see what it looks like. I'm going to hold on the brakes here and run these engines up. Try not to overspeed or overtemp them. Now we'll leave it right at about 95% thrust per side. 95%, rather NG, percent RPM. Airspeed's live, 70 knots. 80 and rotate. Just like with the piston version, the rotation, even for service update 14, is incredible. Let's go ahead and pull the gear up and the flaps to see if we can get that 4,000 foot a minute climb rate. $3,500, 4,000 foot a minute, flaps up, gear up, climbing out at 132 knots approximately, at 4,000 foot per minute. And that, my friends, is not even full throttle. We're at 101.1 per side approximately. Let's look out the window. Matter of fact, let's look outside, see what that looks like. ,4,000 feet, and we're barely losing any performance with the elevation that we are climbing to. Already almost at 5,000 feet. And I'll start to bring it down. We are already at 140 plus knots and accelerating extremely rapidly. I can tell you the piston engine is excellent. Especially the Grand Duke, it's probably just about what you want in terms of an aircraft not getting away from you. But if you are landing or taking off from a short field or a high air traffic control, high density air traffic controlled area, this aircraft as a single pilot would be, wow, it would be a lot, I think, to handle. At 4,000 foot a minute, things would come at you unless you were having an unrestricted approved climb. Being able to climb that fast would be, I mean, just think about your 152s and your 172s and even your more higher performance Bonanzas. There is no Bonanza from the factory that is going to climb at 4,000 foot per minute. Now, yes, I know this is a modified Duke, right? Rocket engineered, changed, modified, STC'd like crazy, winglets. We have 50% fuel, and essentially we are one pilot, no passenger, no bags. So yes, sorry, just messing with my Airbus quadrants. I find the manipulation of the independent throttles to be extremely exciting. But yeah, this is quite an aircraft, to say the least. Just monkeying with the oil doors here. Worth note, this aircraft comes with a very extensive manual, both this and the piston version. So when you're talking about something with these kind of performance numbers, essentially this is a high-speed, pretty long-range aircraft. Well, we're looking at 1,450 nautical miles with 28,000 foot theoretical ceiling here. Cabin altitude capable of maintaining 10,000 feet. And although I said we weren't really going to use too much cabin pressurization, I did not set that. But it is an extensively modeled cabin pressurization system. That is for sure. That being said, you would want to make sure that that was working if you were going to altitude in this, because at the rate that you can get to that altitude, I do not know what this aircraft can pressurize the cabin at in feet per minute, but if it were too high, you would definitely have ear popping and problems, and it would mess up your equilibrium. So the performance numbers in this aircraft are so high that they're almost detrimental. But if you like things like skateboards with space shuttle motors on them, this is your cup of tea. This thing is an absolute beast. We are at 630 degrees on the ITT, 340 foot-pounds of torque on the motors, which is barely even performing, 84% NG, and we still have our props as high as they go, but we could bring them back, obviously making sure to not overspeed our engine, says the reviewer, who had a fairly hot right engine start, but that's okay. Nobody saw it. We're just cruising here. The same place that we reviewed the Part 1 aircraft for the piston out in Oahu. Because where else would you record such a beautiful plane? So rather than just flying like I know, dog. How's about it? Throw a little bit of flight controls at this beast. Get a feel for it, eh? Little bit of rudder input. Naturally, this isn't a stunt plane, but it is interesting to feel the difference between the piston and the Turbine Duke, because normally you just review a single aircraft. There's not a different engine variant that's so different it dramatically changes the flying experience. Most notably, of course, it's the same airframe other than the nacelles and the engines and the CG, things of that nature in the range, but it does have the same airfoil for wings, so essentially in a straight line it feels pretty identical, I would say, to the piston version, but the straight line performance and the climbing performance is absolutely outrageous. When you have something in excess like this with performance, I would say that it could get you out of situations maybe the piston could not. If you were ever having any issues with, tailwinds or headwinds, you would be able to climb out at an extraordinarily faster rate on a takeoff roll than you would with a piston, especially if you were heavy, full of passengers and bags. On a very hot, humid day, this aircraft would be able to perform, by the numbers in theory, a lot harder and stronger than the piston would. But if you fly by the book, as per the rules, both cups of tea here offer an incredible package. We're still chilling on the page here with the engine and the cabin, as the Piston Duke has exactly an EFB just like this, a little bit different due to the different mechanical differences. But it's interesting to note how the time went into. Essentially, you're looking at the same aircraft, but in effect, you're kind of not, right? Because everything here is coded. All of these gauges. You want to do a Duke? That's great. You want to do 2 Dukes? Even better. You want to do one with the piston? You want to do one with the turbine? What? Okay, that means extra coding. Not only just the engines and the performance numbers, but also the EFB. I mean, that's different. It's different than the other version. So essentially, you kind of have 2 airplanes here. Whichever and or both float your boat, as they say. Can't go wrong. Fantastic. So with that, in traditional fashion, I'll bring us right back as we line up for a final approach. And welcome back, just like that, of course, instantaneous. What we're doing here is exactly what we did with the other aircraft. We are going to come off the northwest tip here, make that right-hand corner, and fly the straight-in approach to the final. I'm doing it this way so that I can compare both aircrafts pretty much identically with as minimal variables as possible, because, again, they are essentially, in theory, 2 different airplanes when it comes to their power. So as I'm testing the throttles here, I'm slowly advancing, as you can see, and you can see the airspeed indicator going absolutely nuts. Exceedance of torque. That's cool. Why don't we blow the engines up while we're at it? Not. But being able to see that is cool. I did that intentionally on the airspeed indicator. If you didn't see that, rewind and go back for a few seconds, and I want you to notice how fast the engines and the aircraft, like how quick everything responds in this. It is very, very quick to the touch. As I stated, this aircraft was not originally designed by Beech with turboprops in mind, so the fact that you are multiplying your horsepower factor by a fair deal, it's safe to say that this aircraft is absolutely overpowered, so you can kind of fly at the top of that green-white arc there around the 200 knot at low altitudes. Not sure how the airframe would handle that over time based off of the exceedances. I'm sure, as an airplane in the 70s, I'm sure it's more than capable of its own measurable level of sufficient strength. However, like I said, those are extremely large engines bolted to our wing. So, just food for thought. We are within the white arc, so I'm going to throw flaps and check out the gear animation, which in theory should be very similar to the other version. Very quick, very smooth. Okay, so right off at about our 11:30 is our Dillingham Airfield here in Oahu. Everything should theoretically be set up just as I like to do. Go ahead and set up for neutral trim. That way I'm not fighting the aircraft yoke all the way down. Although I can definitely feel the nose of the aircraft is more susceptible to pitching moment up and down and left and right based off of the engine split of RPM and the torque factor here, as well as the ability for this aircraft to accelerate and decelerate pretty rapidly, especially in the positive direction. So that's kind of just something to keep in mind as you're on approach. We were just at 100 knots, now we're approaching 120 and I barely moved the throttle. So in a way, this aircraft does climb and have higher performance values overall than the piston. I can tell right away. It's a lot more to land in terms of workload. It's not hard, but it is more to pay attention to, especially with split throttle. And right about this point on the part one, I was mentioning I fly with the Airbus TCA split throttle quadrant because I feel if you have an aircraft of this level and you can have the means to do so, I think what's nice is having the split throttle to simulate the left and right engines. It's also another reason why I have the PMS 50 GTN, or for that matter, the TDS 750 XI, because you want everything as close to study level as possible when you're aiming for this sort of experience. Just like that, we're at idle, and again, extremely easy landing. Extremely easy. A little bit more to deal with on the way down, but that was, again, as in the other video, as I keep mentioning, that was a landing on service update 14. So with the new contact patch model and the physics that are coming with 15, this aircraft may require, or you may want to, do another reinstall of it to enable those features with the installer. That being said, as it is, it's quite an amazing airplane. That was, again, showing, if you watch the first one, that it was not a fluke that I made a good landing on the first one. I called that one a greaser, but this one is also a greaser because I did not have to put any extra effort in except on approach with the extra power. So let's go ahead and hit this taxiway back. Flaps are cleaned up. And I'll go ahead and give my final impressions, although I'm sure you already know what they are. Apologies, I shouldn't say in advance because we're getting towards the end of the video, but if I'm repeating myself a lot about the other variant, like I said, it just basically denotes that most aircraft are just singular in review, and there's not an entirely different modeled engine package with essentially the same airframe. So I'm doing a lot of backtracking and repeating, but I think it's worth the effort to say this aircraft is very high on the performance scale. For general aviation, it's just like their TBM A50. If you have that, you know exactly what this was going to be. You knew. You just knew. BlackSquare puts out an incredible product. I had not purchased any of their products before because I haven't flown in the flight simulator really since FSX many eons ago. And if they were there as a developer for that, I was not aware of it. So these are my first experiences with BlackSquare. The TBM, the Piston Duke, and now the Turbine Duke for the final review, part 2. And I'll tell you, I like all of them. I have not reviewed the TBM A50, but I can tell you, it is extremely comparable in terms of systems fidelity. It does not have the EFB to this level, but that being said, I hate to shine a light on impossible creativity, but this is essentially a yardstick. This is the new yardstick. This is an excellent product. I'm gushing, as I always gush in all of my videos, because I try to bring you the best content and the best DLC. If it's not worth your time, my time, or our money, you will not see it on the channel. That goes to say, yes, I haven't reviewed any other extremely nice aircraft, but I'm coming into the review game late here, as we're now looking into 2024 and beyond for the new flight simulator and all the service updates here. And with that, they're slated in the coming years. I think now is a great time to get into these sims. If you're worried about 2024, a lot of these aircraft will be able to come along with you too 2024, so just keep that in mind. It is not a useless purchase to pick up something like this with 2024 looming, because they essentially are going to scale right over, to my understanding. And you can hear pretty much the engine stop, but the propellers are still rotating. That's that free rotation from the PT6. Not so common shaft through the center of the engine, right? That being stated, let's go ahead and turn the batteries and the inverters off and put all the flight locks on, all the things I'll forget for the next time I fly this thing. Okay, fantastic. So, as always, you know, whether you buy the single version of this for around 50 or you buy the bundle for around 70, whether you like the piston or the turbine or you like both, there's a market for everything. That's the beauty of having so many awesome options in 2020 as a simulator. This plane is highly, highly overpowered. I was not sure if it would make that much of a difference in comparison with the Grand Duke or the Duke, but it does. This plane is like a scary roller coaster ride with a couple missing wheels. It doesn't seem like it's that dramatic, but that speaks to the refinement of the coding here that BlackSquare provides us enthusiasts. However, if you get your hands on a copy of your own, you'll find out what I'm talking about. So, for now, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this review. And until the next one, I'll catch you later. Bye-bye.